My name is Claire, and I never imagined the faces smiling beside me would one day carve my world into splintered reflections. I remember that night in the studio, the glow of monitors painting everyone's features with soft halo light. We sat elbow to elbow, Nina sketching new icons, Marcus tapping keys with calm precision, and I felt the thrill of creation pulse through my veins. Our project, an app meant to capture fleeting sparks of inspiration, carried all our hopes. I leaned over to adjust a code snippet when I noticed it, a hidden folder named Project Highlights, Private. My heart skipped. I blinked, certain I'd hallucinated, but there it was, pulsing on the shared drive. Curiosity trembled through me, laced with unease. I clicked. The screen filled with messages woven from betrayal, Nina and Marcus plotting to take credit for my designs, mocking my uncertainty, scheming to pitch our work without any mention of my name. Every line of text felt like a pulse of cold iron in my chest. I stared at the glow of words that should never have been seen, realizing trust had already slipped through my fingers like water. My hands shook as I hovered over, close, but I couldn't look away. I read on, heart pounding, as a deep fracture split every memory, every shared coffee cup, every late night of collaboration. I remembered Nina's soft encouragement, Marcus's steady presence. Those moments now tasted like empty promises, their warmth a cruel illusion. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling the rapid tattoo of my pulse, and slid from the chair until my back hit the cold floor. The hum of servers felt like distant thunder. I forced myself up, legs unsteady, and left the studio without a word. The night air struck me with a sharp gasp. I could hardly breathe through the rush of adrenaline. Streetlights blurred as I stumbled down the sidewalk, mind racing with betrayal's taste. Every lamppost seemed to glare at me, accusing. I pressed my forehead to a metal railing, closed my eyes, and let the cool iron anchor me while my thoughts spiraled. In the restless hours before dawn, sleep slipped away. I lay in bed, blanket tangled at my waist, listening to the faint hum of traffic, heart thrumming like a trapped bird. My stomach knotted with anger, my jaw clenched until my teeth bit into my lip. Memories flooded in unbidden, Nina's vibrant laugh at the coffee shop, her fingers brushing mine as she handed me a latte, Marcus's quiet nod when I shared a rough sketch. I had trusted them, trusted these voices that echoed now with betrayal. My vision blurred, and I blinked until the shapes on my ceiling snapped back into focus. Morning came, and I crossed the studio threshold again, raw and unmade, feeling every heartbeat echo in my ears. I didn't wait for them. I booted my laptop, fingers stiff with resolve, and opened my email. With deliberate care, I drafted a message to our entire team, proof of every conversation, every plan to undermine me, each mocking screenshot. My fingers trembled as they hovered over send, stomach twisting in knots. Then I clicked. The email slipped into our group inbox like a dropped stone sinking in water, sending ripples through the silence. I closed the laptop, the click echoing like a verdict, and sank onto a battered couch in the corner, wrapping my arms around my knees. The fabric scratched my skin as I rocked, trying to steady the storm swirling in my mind. Sweat beaded at the base of my skull, cold despite the warmth of midday sun filtering through the blinds. Silence enveloped me until I heard soft, deliberate footsteps. Each step drew closer, and my muscles coiled, ready for confrontation. The door creaked open. Nina slipped in, her eyes red-rimmed, guilt flickering in her gaze. Marcus followed, jaw tight, hands clenched. Their voices wavered, searching for words that might stitch the world back together, but the fracture had already formed. I turned to face them, chest heaving, jaw locked. The glow of the monitor cast long shadows across their faces, carving every line of regret. In that hush, I felt the river of our friendship split, the current pulling us toward separate shores. A low breath escaped me, laden with grief and something else, determination. I stepped forward, ready to let the truth carry us wherever it must, even if it meant all of this would break apart. Fear twisted my stomach as Nina's voice quivered. "Claire. I'm so sorry." She pressed her palms to her cheeks, eyes glassy with regret. Her apology felt raw, like damp cloth pressed against a fresh wound, and I could almost taste her guilt on the air. My breathing went shallow. A memory flickered, her late-night laughter over spilled sketches. Could it have been real? My throat constricted, and a tight knot formed in my gut. Marcus stood behind her, shoulders hunched, gaze fixed on the floor. He raised a hand as if to reach out, but paused. His jaw tightened. "We never wanted it to go this far," he said softly, voice cracking. Every word echoed around the studio, bouncing off idle chairs and blank canvases. The hum of machines felt distant, like I was listening underwater. My heart thundered, part fear, part fury. I clenched my fists until my nails bit into my palms. The sting grounded me. "You schemed to erase me," I said, voice low. My words trembled, but I forced them out. The air felt thick, each syllable weighing a kilogram. Nina's shoulders shook as tears spilled down her face. Marcus stared, eyes glistening with shame. The space between us felt immeasurable, a canyon carved by their betrayal. Silence stretched like a taut wire. My jaw felt locked, breath shallow. Heat rose through my chest, flooding every nerve ending. In that hush, I realized I could forgive them or let this wound fester. Forgiveness felt impossible. Every memory had been tainted. I looked at the scattered sketches, the half-built interface on my screen. Hours of work, my passion reduced to a detail in their plan. My hands fell away from my palms, the pain dulling into cold resolve. Without a word, I turned back to my laptop. Fingers hovered over keys. I navigated to the design files that housed every version, every iteration. Each layer held my fingerprints, literal traces of my dedication. I opened the latest prototype, then saved a copy to a secure folder. My breath steadied. I would not let my work vanish. Not like that. I opened a new document and began drafting a contract, terms for my intellectual property, my rights to the design. Legal jargon felt stiff and foreign, but it was a lifeline. I forced myself to stay calm, tapping keys with precision. Nina knelt beside me, voice soft, "Please, let's talk this through." Her words trembled like leaves in a storm. I pressed send on the contract, watching it travel to my personal email, proof of ownership etched in digital ink. I slid the laptop closed and looked at them. "This project ends now," I said, voice steady as stone. Nina's breath hitched. Marcus's eyes widened. I felt no triumph, only cold necessity. They protested, words tumbling like loose stones. I listened as I packed my bag, charger, notebook, phone. My hands moved with mechanical efficiency, each item a ritual of departure. My chest cramped, my throat raw with unshed tears, but I breathed in deeply, leaning into the discomfort. I zipped the bag shut and stood. My legs felt like new metal springs, light and ready. I walked to the door. Every step sounded like final echoes of our time together. Nina reached out. I didn't turn. The tip of my boot nudged the door open, and light spilled in from the hallway. For a moment, I thought I'd slip back inside, that things could be mended. But I didn't. I stepped through the threshold, shoulders squared. The door closed softly behind me. No turning back. Outside, the corridor stretched ahead, fluorescent lights humming. I pressed my back against the cool wall, heart still pounding. My fingers curled into fists again, knuckles white, and I realized the river had carried me to new terrain. Their betrayal had ruptured the channel, but now I could carve a fresh path. It would be painful, and the current would bite, but I would navigate it. I inhaled, tasting resolve. The next bend waited. Stepping into the corridor, I exhaled, pressing my back into the cool paint-scuffed wall. Every breath felt heavy, like inhaling gravel. The hum of office chatter drifted through doors, muffled but insistent, reminding me how alive the world remained outside that studio's betrayal. My phone buzzed, a message from Lena, my dearest friend since college, asking if I could meet her for coffee. I shuffled down the hall, each footstep echoing. My heart hammered, my palms were slick with sweat. I needed someone who hadn't been tangled in the betrayal, someone to remind me I still existed apart from this fracture. I pushed open the cafe door, the scent of roasted beans wrapping around me. Lena stood at our usual corner table, her arms folded as if bracing herself. When she saw me, her eyebrows rose with concern. "Claire," she said softly, rising to hug me. I felt her warmth, the familiar shape of her shoulder under my cheek. My throat tightened. I clung for a moment, letting tears pool before backing away. "Hey," I whispered, voice cracking. She guided me to the seat. I sat, covering my face with shaking hands. "I saw your email," she murmured. "I'm so sorry." Her words landed like tremors beneath my ribs. I lifted my head, eyes raw. "They were my world, Lena," I said, voice hoarse. "I feel erased." Lena reached across, sliding my phone into my palm, her thumb resting gently on the screen. "You sent me these," she said. She swiped to a screenshot of Nina's chat with Marcus. "Nina, we need to keep Claire out of this. She can't know about the funding deal. Marcus, don't worry. By next week, no one will remember she ever designed it." My breath hitched seeing their words in bold, unreadable font against the dark mode background. That proof burned hotter than any memory. Lena handed me another image, a photo Nina had sent Marcus of my early sketches, annotated with mocking comments. Cute attempt, but far from polished. I blinked against tears. "They dissected every line I drew," I whispered. My jaw snapped shut as sobs trembled in my chest. Lena's hand was steady on my arm, her presence a tether. I folded myself inward, knees drawn close, rocking slightly. My stomach churned, bile sour in my mouth. Shame rushed through me as I realized how deeply I'd been deceived. If I hadn't opened that folder, but that thought felt pointless now. Lena fetched lattes, placing the mugs before me. I wrapped my hands around the porcelain, warmth seeping into my fingers. The steam blurred patterns on the table. I inhaled, tasting coffee and something bittersweet, a trace of calm. I studied my reflection in the window. My eyes were rimmed in red, my shoulders slumped, muscles knotted. I flexed my fingers and felt determination unfurl inside the ache. I owed it to myself to reclaim what was stolen, more than the code and designs. Even my trust had been ripped away. "Thank you," I said, voice steadying. Lena smiled, eyes bright with solidarity. "You're not alone," she said. "I believe you." We sat for a long moment, the cafe's slow hum wrapping us in a safe cocoon. Outside, pedestrians moved in constant flow, unaware of the rupture in my world. I could almost feel their steps nudging me forward. I set down the mug and wiped my eyes. My hands were steadier now. The proofs on my phone glowed silently, evidence of betrayal, but also of clarity, of a path unfolding. I would rebuild, forge new alliances, channel this pain into purpose. I stood, heart still buzzing, and slid my phone into my pocket. Lena rose with me, and as we stepped into the sunlit street, I realized something. I was walking toward the next bend. The current of my life, though scarred, wasn't finished flowing. I stepped off the curb into the afternoon light, Lena's hand slipping from mine as if she trusted I'd find my footing. The buzz of traffic felt distant, like ocean waves beyond a cliff, and I drew in a breath that trembled in my chest. My legs carried me forward, each step a heartbeat echoing determination and fear. My phone vibrated, an unknown number. My thumb hovered before I answered. "Hello?" My voice was tight, throat dry, cottony. A low voice on the other end said, "Claire, this is Rami from Trinity IP." My pulse jolted. I'd researched lawyers last night, and Trinity had come up as fiercely protective of creators. I pressed my back against a brick wall, closing my eyes. "You called about the contract?" I managed. "Yes," Rami said. "I saw your draft. You need formal representation." His tone was gentle but precise. My fingers curled into a fist at my side. I'm ready," I said. Every syllable felt heavy, like I'd surfaced from water. "Can we meet?" He gave an address in the financial district. I traced the words on my palm, chest twisting. A part of me wanted to run back to my old studio, beg Nina and Marcus to forgive me, anything to undo the ache. But I shook my head, straightened my spine. "Tomorrow morning," I said. I ended the call and looked at the city street. People streamed past me, heads down, locked in their own currents. My reflection flickered in a shop window, eyes bright with purpose, jaw set. I brushed a loose strand of hair from my face and began walking again, letting the sun warm my skin, reminding me I was alive beyond betrayal. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with blueprints strewn before me, wireframes, mood boards, a sketch of a new interface idea. My palms were slick as I traced each line. Lena had sent me contacts for potential collaborators, urging me to rebuild. I tapped a message to Kai, a freelance developer I'd met at a hackathon last year. "Are you available for a chat?" Seconds later, he replied, "Always for you." "Tomorrow?" Relief bloomed through my ribs. I leaned back, exhaling a shaky laugh. My stomach fluttered with nerves, and a flicker of excitement. The betrayal had ripped me open, but I still had the core of my passion intact. Midnight found me pacing my small apartment, worn carpet soft underfoot. My phone dinged again, an invitation to join a private Slack workspace for independent creators. The promise was community without politics, no hidden agendas. I tapped to accept and watched as messages scrolled by, introductions, project pitches, advice threads. My chest tightened with hope. I clicked, new conversation, typed, "Hi, I'm Claire, designer, need guidance on IP and building a prototype," and hit send. Almost instantly, responses popped up, offers of tips, empathetic notes. My pulse fluttered, a cautious bloom of trust. Yet guilt gnawed at me. I'd exposed Nina and Marcus to shame and consequences. Was I causing irreparable harm? My breath came shallow, and I pressed fingers to bruised ribs, a phantom ache from when betrayal had struck. I curled into my chair, shoulders hunching, and whispered, "I did the right thing, right?" My voice shook, and silence answered back. I scrolled my phone, landing on a photo of our team at launch party, a blurred snapshot of joy now tainted by treachery. Nina's smile was radiant, Marcus's arm across my shoulders protective. My chest ached. I tapped into the gallery, found the image, and saved it into a folder labeled Lessons. Each time I looked at it, I'd remember both the light we shared and the darkness that followed. Hours passed, and dawn crept through curtains. I rubbed my eyes, body humming with fatigue and adrenaline. Everything burned with the weight of change, my old life fractured, my future unwritten. But beneath exhaustion, I felt a steady ember of resolve. I would rebuild, on my terms, with no one to betray me again. I stretched, muscles stiff, then packed a satchel with charger, notebook, coffee thermos. The city slept as I locked my door behind me, sealing away memories that had turned toxic. The sidewalk was empty except for stray leaves dancing in a pale breeze. I lifted my face to the sky, letting the cool air fill my lungs. My heart thrummed in my ears, a drum signaling a new march. And with that first step forward, I realized the river of my life had shifted course. It would carve new banks, embrace unexpected tributaries, and carry me, scarred but unbroken, toward whatever lay ahead. I stepped off the curb into a slant of morning sun, my coat pulled tight around trembling shoulders. The city's pulse thrummed through the pavement beneath my boots as I crossed to the glass tower where Trinity IP had its offices. My heart hammered so loudly I could taste it, metallic, urgent, against the back of my throat. I reached the revolving door, paused, fingers white around the metal bar, and let it pull me inside. The lobby's cool marble underfoot sent a shiver up my spine. Beneath the high ceilings, the receptionist offered a polite smile that felt distant, like she was seeing only a reflection, not the chaos roiling inside me. I clutched my satchel, laptop and folder of proofs pressing into my ribs, and settled onto a leather chair where magazines lay fanned out, their glossy pages promising escape. My palms were slick, I wiped them on my coat and tried to steady my breathing. A door clicked open and Rami appeared, a tall man in a navy suit, calm gray eyes. He extended a hand. His grip was firm, professional, but not cold. "Claire," he said, voice low, "thank you for coming." He led me into a conference room where light pooled around a sleek table. I sank into a chair, shoulders sagging as if I'd carried this weight since childhood. Rami opened his leather binder and slid across printed screenshots, the same proofs I'd emailed. I watched his eyes flick over every line, every mocking annotation. When he spoke, his tone was measured, they crossed clear boundaries. "You have leverage to demand recognition, or to threaten legal action. We can draft a cease and desist and negotiate credit and compensation." His words felt like tools laid out on a table, options I'd never had before. But as he spoke of consequences, lawsuits, public notices, potential career damage to Nina and Marcus, I felt a hollow twist in my gut. My jaw locked. I never wanted to destroy them, I whispered, voice rough. My pulse slammed against my temples. I remembered Nina's tear-streaked apology, Marcus's slack-shouldered shame. They were human, faulty, yes, but human. I swallowed, throat dry. Is there a way to fix this without ruining them? My words tumbled out, edged with panic. Rami paused, pen hovering over a notepad. He let silence stretch until I felt it in my bones. "You're entitled to protect your work," he said finally. "But if your goal is acknowledgement more than punishment, we can draft a formal agreement for credit attribution and royalty shares. That path spares litigation but still holds them accountable." Relief rippled through me, but it was tangled with guilt, an undercurrent dragging me down. Back on the sidewalk, I clutched my coffee cup like a lifeline. Steam curled around my face as I walked, each step a plea for clarity. I thought of the photos I'd hidden, the team at launch party, everyone laughing, now filed under lessons. I shook my head, as if to dislodge old hopes. No going back, only forward, but which way? Over the next days, I drafted terms with Rami's guidance, attribution in every press release, a share of future revenues, a clause forbidding erasure of my name. I spent late nights refining language, fingers aching from typing and from the tremor deep in my hands. Lena hovered with cups of tea and sympathetic sighs. Kai messaged constantly about initial code skeletons for my new app, surprising me with bursts of encouragement. Each supportive word warmed me, but also reminded me of the cost I was about to impose. Finally, Rami emailed the proposal. I stared at the subject line, agreement draft for Claire Matthews, and felt a quiver in my chest. This document would change everything for Nina and Marcus. It would brand them as the architects of betrayal. My stomach clenched at the thought. I almost deleted the email. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the proposal open on my laptop. Outside, city lights blinked like distant stars. I sipped tea, trying to breathe past the knot in my throat. My reflection gleamed in the dark window, eyes bright but haunted. I realized I had two choices: to unleash a public reckoning that might destroy the team we'd been, or to forge a private accord that would bind us together again with truth as our foundation. Hands trembling, I selected reply all and typed. I've reviewed the agreement. Thank you for your willingness to collaborate on fair credit and compensation. Let's set a meeting, just the three of us, to finalize the details. I paused, chest tight. Then I clicked send. The email slipped into the void, and I exhaled so deeply my shoulders dropped. I stared at the screen, heart thudding, waiting for their responses to ripple back. Anxiety and hope collided in my veins, each pulse tainted with the bitter taste of what had to be done, proof that sometimes, justice doesn't heal without cutting deep wounds first. The next morning, my phone buzzed before my eyes had even focused. I sat up in bed, heart hammering against my ribs like a frantic drummer. 2 replies, one from Nina, terse and formal, another from Marcus, longer, trembling with half-spoken regrets. I exhaled a shaky laugh. This was it. I slid out of bed, legs heavy as wet clay, and crossed to the window, pulling back the curtain. The city woke beneath a pale sky, indifferent to the storm in my chest. Over breakfast, I drafted a neutral reply, confirm the meeting, ask for a time and place. My fingers hovered over the keys, mind flickering with doubts. Was I being too lenient? Too harsh? I pressed send, closed my laptop, and pressed my palms to my eyes. A dull ache throbbed at my temples, and I rubbed my hairline, trying to smooth the knots of tension. They suggested a mid-afternoon meetup at the quiet bistro near our old studio. Its faded brick walls and small wooden tables still held echoes of our first celebration. So much laughter once spilled between those chairs. I left my apartment in a coat that felt stiff, too formal, betraying the turmoil beneath. My stomach fluttered in nervous anticipation as I crossed the street, passing storefronts that blurred together, reminders of life continuing beyond this confrontation. Inside the bistro, a low hum of conversation clung to the air, mingling with the scent of toasted bread and brewing coffee. I found them at a corner table, Nina hunched over, cheeks still puffy from crying, her hands clasped around a teacup as if it could steady her nerves. Marcus sat beside her, back straight, fingers drumming the table's edge. Their eyes lifted to me, shadows of shame and fear flickering in their gaze. I swallowed, muscles taut. They invited me to sit, words that felt brittle, like they might shatter beneath the weight of our shared past. I slid into the seat opposite them, clutching my own mug until the porcelain warmed my fingers. Silence settled like dust, then Nina exhaled, voice a soft tremor. "Claire, thank you for agreeing to this." Her words were careful, as if each syllable tiptoed around old wounds. I nodded, throat tight. "I want this to be fair," I said, voice low. "I'm not looking to destroy you, only to reclaim what's mine." My chest tightened, I could taste the bitterness on my tongue. Their heads dipped, eyes flicking between the table and my face. Marcus cleared his throat. We understand," he began, voice wavering. "But I need you to know, we never meant to hurt you." I felt my jaw clamp shut. I remembered the laughter that had turned lethal, the private jokes at my expense, the plan laid out in cold digital text. Yet seeing their remorse made my resolve wobble. Guilt tumbled through me like loose stones, clattering against anger. I pressed a hand to my heart, feeling it straining with contradiction, justice versus compassion, revenge versus forgiveness. Nina's voice cracked as she spoke. Things got out of control. We were worried about funding, about being left behind. I felt pressure at home, with my parents expecting so much, and I thought, if we edged you out, we'd secure our own futures. Her words tumbled free, raw, and jagged. I sensed a tremor in her posture, eyes darting to Marcus for support. He nodded, shoulders slumping. I was the one who suggested the private folder. I thought if I could strengthen our position, we'd all benefit. I didn't think it would go this far. His gaze flickered to mine, and in that instant, I saw more than betrayal. I saw fear of failure, desperation born of deadlines and expectations. My breath hitched. I reached across the table, placing a hand on Nina's. Her fingers twined with mine, trembling, and I felt a flicker of the old connection, before deceit turned trust to ash. My other hand rested on Marcus's, whose knuckles whitened under my touch. The tears they had shed were real, proof that guilt could weigh as heavily as betrayal. I drew in a slow breath and lifted my mug, eyes locking with theirs. "We'll formalize the agreement," I said softly. "You acknowledge my work, share credit and revenue. But I need honesty, and no more secrets." The words were quiet, but each carried the weight of my pain and my willingness to rebuild. Nina nodded, tears slipping anew, and Marcus exhaled in relief. We spent the next hour drafting points on a napkin, clear credit lines, shared royalties, transparency clauses. My pen shook as I wrote, but with each stroke, I felt a cautious healing, like sealing cracks in a fractured vase. When we finished, I gathered the napkin and folded it carefully into my notebook. No grand triumph, no dramatic denunciation, just a pact bound by truth. As I walked away, the napkin tucked inside my portfolio, the bistro's door closed softly behind me. The afternoon sun warmed my back, and I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The current of our relationship had shifted again, scarred, but redirected toward honesty. The next bend in the river glinted ahead, and though the water would never be the same, I felt ready to navigate its course. Claire stepped out of the bistro feeling lighter, the folded napkin in her portfolio a fragile promise of honesty. Days blurred into focused devotion as I threw myself into rebuilding, from scratch, my vision of the app. I rented a sunlit workspace above a florist's shop, its windows framing swaying blooms that reminded me life could still be beautiful, even after roots have been torn. I started mornings by sketching interfaces in a leather-bound notebook, coffee steam curling around my pens as I tested every button and gesture. Kai joined me there, crouched at a corner desk, tapping out code with determination. His cheerful banter broke through my lingering doubt. "We'll get through the MVP by next week," he said, eyes alight. I smiled, but inside, my chest throbbed with anxiety. Every new line of code felt like exposing another piece of myself to potential failure. Afternoons found me in virtual calls with potential collaborators. I pitched my refreshed concept, now branded under my own name, and answered questions about features, security, monetization. Each, "Tell me more about your background," jolted me, but I leaned into honesty, describing both my designs and the betrayal that drove me to protect my work. Some listeners recoiled at the conflict, others nodded, intrigued by the raw authenticity. A small seed of hope sprouted. There were people who valued integrity over polish. Meanwhile, Nina and Marcus kept to their side of the agreement. They sent updates, press releases acknowledging my design credit, revenue statements confirming the agreed split. I read each email with a pinch of disbelief. They had honored their word. Still, when my phone lit up with their messages, a tremor ran through me. Could I trust this sincerity, or would history repeat itself? I pressed my thumb to the screen and stared until I convinced myself that people could change. One evening, as dusk stained the sky lavender, I found a note slipped under my studio door, a simple index card with Nina's handwriting. "Claire, thank you for giving me a chance to make this right. I'm sorry every day. N." I held the card to my chest, fingers trembling. Guilt and relief warred in my veins. I tucked it into my notebook and forced myself to focus on the task at hand, finalizing the prototype for an investor demo. That weekend, the workspace throbbed with activity. I surrounded myself with prototype boards and user feedback printouts. I tested flows over and over, adjusting color contrast for accessibility, refining onboarding steps until they felt intuitive. Each success sent a small thrill through me, each bug discovered brought a pulse of frustration. But as I squinted at the screen late into the night, I felt alive in a way I hadn't since before the betrayal. On Monday morning, Kai and I set up in a high-rise conference room for the demo. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered sweeping city views, and the seat of power felt both thrilling and terrifying. Investors filed in, faces polite but unreadable. My heart hammered as I stood at the podium, prototype in hand. I took a breath that shook through my shoulders and tapped "Start Presentation." I spoke about our mission to capture fleeting inspiration, about user stories of creatives finding their spark. Then I paused, glancing at the slide crediting me as lead designer. The room was silent. I felt every pair of eyes on me, some curious, some skeptical. But I pressed on, walking through features, live interactions, my voice steady despite the tremor in my spine. When I finished, I met their gazes and waited. A beat later, one investor leaned forward, lips curving into a small smile. "Your story and your product resonate. We'd like to talk terms." Relief and pride coursed through me, mingled with a bittersweet taste. I had reached this moment because of betrayal, but I had reclaimed my work through resilience. As they discussed next steps, I felt my phone buzz. It was a text from Marcus. "I believe in you. Proud of what you're building." My breath caught. I stared at the message, heart fluttering with a complex ache, trust restored, but fragile. I set my phone aside, attention returning to the room. So much had been broken, forged, broken again, and still I had waded into this current, scratched, scarred, but moving forward. The river of my life had shifted course, carving new banks and revealing hidden depths. And now, with the demo winding down, I realized I was no longer fighting to reclaim what was lost. I was building something entirely new. When I stepped off that high-rise floor, my legs trembled in relief and exhaustion. The city's pulse rushed past me as I descended in the elevator, heart still drumming from the investors' applause. In the lobby, I pressed my palm to the cool glass of the automatic doors, trying to steady the tremor that ran through my spine. Success tasted sweet, but under its surface lay a hardened knot of doubt. What if the cohesion I'd rebuilt proved as fragile as before? Back at my workspace, lights slanted through dusty windows, illuminating sketches pinned to corkboards. Each one marked progress, wireframes refined, user feedback scribbled in margins, color palettes aligned with accessibility. But as I settled at my desk, chest fluttering, I noticed a fresh email from Nina. The subject line was simple, update, but when I opened it, my stomach clenched. Attached were blurred photos of receipts, hotel stays in another city, late-night dinners billed to our joint account, line items I hadn't approved. My breath caught, my hands went slick with sweat as a cold pulse of fear lanced through me. I pressed my back against the chair, knees bent, forehead grazing the edge of my desk. Every muscle tightened. Nina's note below the receipts read, "Had to secure a client in Chicago. Hope this is okay. Let me know if you have concerns." The ambiguity hung between us like a blade. My throat constricted. I wondered if old instincts whispered that silence was safer, that confrontation would rip open wounds I just stitched. My vision blurred, and I pressed 2 fingers to my temple, massaging away the tension knot. My jaw locked as I recalled how easily trust had fractured once. Yet if I didn't address this now, I might be setting the stage for another betrayal. I straightened and texted Nina, "We need clarity. Did you discuss this with me first?" The message hung on my screen, and I forced myself to breathe, inhaling the faint scent of jasmine from the florist shop below. Minutes later, my phone chimed. Nina's reply popped up, "I thought you trusted me to handle client outreach. Sorry if I overstepped." The apology felt incomplete, like a song missing its final note. I closed my eyes, shoulders sagging under the weight of uncertainty. My mind raced through memories of her late-night pressures, muffled sobs over unexpected bills, the way she flinched when funding timelines slipped. Had desperation driven her again? A tremor ran through me, anger at being blindsided, guilt for doubting her motives. I tapped out another message, "We agreed on transparency. Let's talk in an hour." I hit send and sank back, heart thudding. Sweat beaded at the nape of my neck. I glanced at the prototype on my screen, each interaction, each tap, the embodiment of my late nights and broken trust. If I lost focus now, the momentum we'd gained could slip through our fingers. When Nina arrived, she hovered in the doorway, cheeks flushed, eyes rimmed with fatigue. Her shoulders bowed under an invisible weight. "Claire," she began, voice hesitant. I gestured to the chair opposite. She sat, hands twisting in her lap. I pushed the receipts across the table. "Explain these," I said, voice low but steady, as though calibrating the truth. She swallowed, lip trembling. I met a potential client in Chicago last week. They're a big opportunity. I didn't want to delay and risk losing them." Her words spilled out, raw. "We've been bleeding cash. My parents keep asking for returns." I panicked. She met my gaze then, eyes glossy with vulnerability. My chest pulsed with conflicting currents, anger at the secrecy, tenderness for her desperation. I pressed my lips together, jaw aching. "We're building this together," I said, voice rough. "Every decision matters. I need to trust you." Heat flared in my ears as I realized how vital her integrity was to our shared vision. She nodded, tears pooling, and I reached out, brushing away a stray strand of hair that clung to her temple. Her skin trembled under my touch, and I felt the fragility of repair beneath her apology. Behind her, Marcus appeared in the doorway, posture hesitant. He carried a stack of user surveys, positive feedback glowing with praise. "The demo's success is rippling through early adopters," he said quietly. I exhaled, relief threading through my veins. His presence anchored the moment in collective purpose rather than fractured blame. I folded the receipts, sliding them into a folder labeled Finances, and opened the survey results, letting the positive testimonies refocus our momentum. As Marcus and Nina leaned in to discuss next steps, my chest loosened, warmth spreading through my limbs. The current of our collaboration shivered with tension but still carried us forward. Later, as dusk spilled across the skyline, I stood by the window, watching lights blink awake in distant towers. My fingers tapped against the glass in a slow rhythm, matching the pulse of promise and uncertainty coursing through me. The journey would demand transparency, accountability, and willingness to confront any hidden fractures. But if our river could survive this bend, this test of trust, I knew it could carve a deeper, stronger channel yet. Dawn arrived with a soft hush, and I woke to the pale glow of streetlights fading outside my window. My muscles ached from yesterday's tension, but something in me felt steadier, anchored by the honesty we'd forged. I dressed quickly, pulling on a sweater that smelled faintly of last night's tea. In the kitchen, I found a half-empty mug by the sink. Lena's handwriting on a sticky note caught my eye, "Kick today's tail." I smiled, the simplicity of her faith in me warming my chest. By mid-morning, I was back in the shared workspace, humming server fans and the distant hum of traffic below. The corkboard by my desk bore a new sheet, Investor Follow-Up, listing names and deadlines. Under it, another note read, "Celebrate tiny wins." I ran a finger over each goal, email sent, calls scheduled, prototype refinements complete. The receipts folder from Nina lingered at the corner, but I'd shelved it. Transparency meant acknowledging mistakes without letting guilt steer the course. Kai burst in, eyes alight. He held 2 coffees. "Prep for the all-hands demo?" he asked, sliding a cup across. I nodded, tasting gratitude in the bitterness. We set up my laptop and connected the projector for our next round of pitches, this time to a broader audience of potential mentors and advisors. I felt the thrum of nerves in my stomach, the same pulse I'd known before every critical moment, but now it felt sharpened by purpose, not desperation. As the room filled, Nina arrived, quietly offering a supportive nod. She carried her own laptop, ready to present financial projections for our revenue share. Marcus followed, clutching a stack of user testimonials printed on glossy paper. For a moment, I caught their eyes and saw mirrors of my own determination and lingering remorse. No words passed between us, the shared purpose in that glance spoke volumes. I took the stage, heart steadier than yesterday. My voice carried through the room as I demonstrated the prototype's latest features, adaptive color themes, integrated brainstorming boards, instant collaboration prompts. I wove in stories from beta testers, artists who felt seen, writers whose block dissolved. When I paused, Nina stood to explain how revenue would be distributed, referencing those clear clauses we drafted on the napkin. Her confidence surprised me, the same hands that once hid costs now laid open our path forward. Marcus then guided the audience through feedback metrics, surveys showing users felt empowered and heard. He smiled as he quoted one comment, "Finally, an app that respects my voice." I felt pride unfurl, not just in the product, but in how far we'd come together. The investors leaned forward, pens scratching notes. Questions came fast, about scalability, security, future features, and we answered as a unit. Trust threaded our responses, each of us filling gaps, reinforcing strengths. After the session, applause rippled through the room. An experienced advisor approached, offering to connect us with a design incubator. Another asked to interview me for a tech blog, drawn by the authenticity of my story. I felt the buzz of success rising, but beneath it, a quiet pulse of caution reminded me how fragile this balance remained. I shook hands with the visitors, each smile a promise and a challenge. Later, as we packed away cables and laptops, Nina hesitated. "Claire, can we talk?" she asked, voice low. We slipped into the hallway. My pulse hitching, I braced for a new fracture. But she reached into her bag and pulled out a small glass jar filled with smooth river stones. On each stone, she'd painted a single word: trust, honesty, second chance. She handed me the jar with trembling hands. "For when doubts rise," she said softly. "A reminder of what we're building." My chest tightened with emotion I couldn't name: relief, gratitude, lingering wariness. I accepted the jar, its weight firm in my palms, and managed a small smile. As Nina and Marcus joined me in the corridor, our shoulders nearly touching, I felt the river of our journey flowing around us, scarred by jagged rocks, but deepening its course, widening its reach. And in that hush before evening's glow, I realized that rebuilding trust wasn't a single act of reconciliation, but a series of deliberate offerings, each one a pebble dropped into the current, rippling outward in hope and resolve. That afternoon, I lingered at my desk long after everyone else had gone, tracing the words on the jar of stones Nina had given me. Each word stirred a different pulse. Trust felt heavy and precious, honesty trembled like a new leaf, second chance flickered with promise. I closed my eyes and let the quiet hum of the workspace settle around me, the scent of paper and coffee drifting through the air. When I packed up to leave, Marcus approached, nodding toward my closed laptop. "There's something you should see," he said, voice low. He led me to the projector setup we'd used for demos and tapped at the connected tablet. The screen flashed our prototype homepage, and then, beneath it, a message box I hadn't programmed: Claire's designs copyrighted under Claire Matthews, 2025. Unauthorized use will be prosecuted. My chest jolted. I remembered dismissing that clause in the draft agreement as overly formal, but Rami had insisted, and Nina and Marcus had agreed. Seeing it live felt like mine, but also aggressive. It proclaimed my ownership, yes, but it threatened everyone else. I looked up at Marcus. His shoulders were rigid. "I thought we needed something firm," he mumbled. "Investors respect strength." I shut the laptop with a slow click, trying to tame the rush of unease pooling in my gut. The claim felt like tilting a scale, from collaboration to confrontation. My hands trembled as I sank onto a stool. "This feels hostile," I said quietly. "It undermines the spirit of what we built." Marcus's face flickered, guilt, defensiveness, something unreadable. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, mind racing through every twist of our journey, the betrayal that shattered me, the pact that held us together, the fragile trust still being woven. I realized that clarity and security, when wielded without care, could become weapons themselves. I drifted into uneasy dreams, haunted by our project's name, spectrum splintered into rigid shards. Morning found me drafting a message to Nina and Marcus: "We need to discuss the copyright notice. It's too heavy-handed. Let's find language that protects my rights without threatening the collaboration." I hit send, then stared at the screen until my chest loosened. We met in the workspace's small conference nook. Nina arrived first, clutching a thermos of tea. Marcus trailed behind with a stack of notebooks. I pointed at the projected notice. "I want protection," I said, "but this sends the wrong signal, like I don't trust you." My voice caught on the last word. Their eyes met mine, vulnerability laid bare. Nina exhaled, voice soft, "I was scared. The last thing I want is another secret." She knelt beside me, placing her tea on the table. "I need to know you won't walk away again." Her words trembled. I reached for her hand but paused, remembering how easily trust had fractured. Marcus flipped open a notebook, revealing sketches of alternative wording: collaborative design by Claire Matthews, c. 2025. All rights reserved. Please contact Claire for usage rights. He pointed at "Please contact Claire," the invitation in place of a threat. "This feels more collaborative," he said. "It respects you without locking us out." A warm knot throbbed in my chest. I realized that our pact, like the river we navigated, needed both strong banks and gentle curves. I nodded, and together we refined the language, each word tested for clarity and tone. By the end, we had a notice that balanced protection and partnership. Later that afternoon, I updated the prototype and refreshed our investor portal. The new notice glowed under the app's logo, designed by Claire Matthews 25. For inquiries, please reach out directly. I breathed in slowly, feeling the tension in my shoulders ease. The notice no longer felt a barricade but a bridge, firm yet inviting. As I closed my laptop and gathered my bag, I touched the jar of stones on my desk. Trust, honesty, second chance. They felt more alive, each a pulse in the current we steered together. Nina and Marcus lingered by the door, offering genuine smiles rather than guarded looks. Stepping into the evening light, I carried our repaired notice like a talisman, and I sensed the river of our collaboration flowing forward, deeper and wider than before, its surface still rippling but no longer threatening to tear us apart. And somewhere around the next bend, I knew we'd find new challenges, and new opportunities to choose how we navigated them. The launch date loomed like a silent tide, and I woke before dawn, heart thrumming with a cocktail of exhilaration and dread. I dressed in charcoal slacks and a crisp white shirt, thought it professional, but every fiber felt stiff against my skin, a reminder of how much was riding on this day. The city outside my window was still dark, streetlights refracting off damp pavement from last night's rain. I pulled a deep breath, tasting something coppery and sweet, and convinced myself that nerves were just a sign I cared. By mid-morning, the co-working space buzzed with frenetic energy. A banner, "Spectrum Go Live," hung crooked over our demo station. Nina hovered near the decor, smoothing folds in the cloth with shaking fingers, while Marcus tested connection speeds on his laptop. I watched them from behind my mug of lukewarm tea, chest tight as I remembered the secret receipts, the jar of painted stones, the gentle but guarded progress we'd made. Today, everything we'd rebuilt would be on display. Investors, press contacts, and a handful of beta users trickled in. I stood by the prototype station, greeting each arrival with a steady smile that felt borrowed from someone stronger than I'd been this morning. My pulse raced as the first official user slid a finger across the touchscreen to create a spark board, the core feature we'd all fought so hard to perfect. The board sprang to life, colors rippling, sticky notes unfolding at her command. A soft gasp escaped her lips, and she muttered, "This is intuitive." Relief rippled through me, but it mingled with a pang of something darker, the knowledge that I'd built this from betrayal's rubble. By midday, cameras clicked. The local tech blog's reporter hovered nearby, notebook poised. She asked for a few words. My throat constricted. I cleared it and spoke of collaboration, resilience, and the mission to empower creatives. I felt a flicker of pride, my voice carried conviction, but also a bitter aftertaste. Would anyone believe it now, after all that had happened? Nina and Marcus stood a few feet behind me, nodding along. Their eyes met mine once, tentative, hopeful, before flicking away. That hesitation echoed the fracturing current I nearly felt catch me off balance. Lunch brought a lull. We gathered around a high table stacked with sandwiches, the air humming with small talk. An anxious beta user asked about roadmap features. I detailed upcoming updates, richer color libraries, AI-driven prompts, expanded collaboration channels. Each sentence bolstered my confidence, transforming fear into momentum, until I caught sight of Nina's face. She smiled, but her eyes were distant, shadows flickering there like storm clouds. My pulse jolted, suspicion coiling in my gut. Was she regretting this exposure? Or was I haunted by echoes of old betrayals? Marcus sensed my distraction. He nudged my elbow. "The press release is up," he said quietly, voice low. I pulled out my phone and opened the link. Spectrum app, led by designer Claire Matthews, secures 50,000 downloads in first hour. I exhaled a breath I hadn't known I'd held. The numbers sparkled on the screen, proof that we'd made an impact. My heart fluttered, relief tugging at my ribs. But in the corner of the header, I noticed another line. Co-founders Nina Park and Marcus Liu build platform vision. The words were correct, but the credit order, Claire's name first, theirs after, still felt like a fragile compromise. A faint sting trembled through me. As afternoon light softened into a warm glow, I stepped aside to let Nina address a small crowd gathered at the bar. She spoke with practiced ease, outlining our journey from concept to launch. Her voice didn't waver, but I noticed her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. When she finished, applause rippled around us. She turned to me, eyes bright, and mouthed, "Thank you." I offered a small nod, chest tightening. Gratitude and wariness swirled within me, Could I accept her sincerity fully after everything? Later, as the event wound down, we gathered our things. The banner drooped, half-torn where a gust of wind had caught it. Marcus slung an arm around my shoulders. "We did it," he said softly. I nodded, feeling the weight of the day settle into my bones. Nina joined us, clutching the jar of stones in her hand, each painted word catching the dying light: trust, honesty, second chance. She extended it toward me, but paused. I took the jar and let the stones shift in my palm, solid, real, reminders of how terrible honesty can bruise and how necessary it is. We walked to the exit together, shoulders nearly touching in solidarity. Outside, the evening air was cool and fragrant with wet pavement. Street lamps cast halos on the sidewalk, and distant car horns sounded like distant calls to move onward. I glanced at my companions, at the faces I had once loved and then learned to fear. The current of our friendship had been torn and mended, again and again, until it carried new depth. I inhaled a slow breath. Despite the ache beneath the surface, despite the crumbs of doubt still clinging to my heart, I felt something shift, a steady surge of hope buoyed by hard-won trust. As we stepped into the night, our shadows stretching behind us, I realized that this launch was not the end, but another bend in the river, another chance to prove that even the sharpest fractures can be smoothed by deliberate, courageous flow. The streets were nearly empty when we spilled out of the co-working lobby, the banner's frayed edge flapping in the breeze behind us. I tucked the jar of stones into my coat pocket, its weight a comforting presence against my hip. Nina and Marcus flanked me, our shoulders brushing as we walked, yet an unspoken tension lingered, like the last echo of a storm. We paused at a crosswalk, the signal blinking, "Don't walk." I glanced at Marcus, who offered a faint, reassuring smile. Nina shifted closer, lowering her voice. "I booked us a table at that little Italian place around the corner," she said. My treat. The offer felt tentative, as if she hoped an evening of shared pasta could seal the cracks we'd been mending all week. I nodded. We crossed together and ducked into candlelit warmth. The restaurant was quiet, with only a handful of diners murmuring over red wine and white tablecloths. Our table waited by the window, scattered rose petals pressed into the wax of a half-burned candle. For a moment, the trappings of celebration caught me off guard. I sank into the seat and exhaled, shoulders relaxing. We ordered bruschetta to start, and I watched Nina as she spoke. "I'm proud of what you've built. I hope this is more than just a project for you now." Her eyes glistened in the candlelight. I felt my chest tighten, hope and fear commingled. "It is," I replied softly. "But I need to know that we'll stay honest, even when things get hectic." Marcus lifted his glass. "To honesty," he toasted, and we all took a sip. The wine was crisp and sharp, and I let its tang ground me. Dinner arrived, pasta with tomato basil sauce, and we ate in companionable silence at first, savoring the simple flavors after weeks of fast food and energy bars. Then conversation drifted to next steps, scaling the servers for increased traffic, refining UX based on user feedback, lining up interviews for tech podcasts. As we spoke, a reporter's email popped up on my phone screen. The subject line read, "Feature request, in-depth profile on Spectrum's founding team." My pulse fluttered, public attention was a double-edged sword. I showed the email to Nina and Marcus. "They want our story," I said. "All of it." Nina's smile tightened. "We've come this far because we've been transparent with each other. Maybe it's time to share that honesty more broadly." Marcus nodded, eyes thoughtful. I considered the risks. Exposing our journey could humanize us, drawing empathy and support, but it could also spotlight our past missteps. Guilt flickered at the corners of my mind. What if readers fixated on the betrayal and not the product? Yet the idea of turning our scars into strength felt right. I met their gazes and said, "Let's do it, an honest narrative, from start to finish." Nina exhaled, relief and apprehension mingling in her expression. Marcus raised his glass again, quieter this time. "To our whole story," he said, "mistakes and all." We clinked glasses, the sound echoing under the low ceiling. After dinner, We lingered over tiramisu and espresso, the city lights flickering through the window. I felt the stirrings of something new, a bond tempered by adversity rather than naive trust. I realized I still carried residues of betrayal, a tightening in my chest when my inbox dinged, a flicker of doubt when Nina's laughter felt just a bit too bright. But seeing them own their mistakes, sharing our tale with the world, gave me a sense of purpose beyond code and design. As midnight approached, we stepped back into the cool air. The jar of stones felt warm in my pocket. Nina slipped her hand into mine, her skin soft and real. Marcus offered his arm, and I linked into their collective warmth. The three of us moved down the quiet avenue, shadows stretching long behind us, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a tentative peace settle in my bones. Behind us, the city glowed, hundreds of windows alight, each one a private story unfolding. Ahead, the path narrowed into the unknown, interviews, investor meetings, scaling challenges. The current of our journey would push us forward, and I knew there would be rapids yet to navigate. But for now, in this hush between 12 and 1, the river was calm, carrying us toward a horizon we would face together, stones in hand, determined to honor the fragile vessel we'd rebuilt. Night air wrapped around us as we walked away from the restaurant, streets quiet except for distant sirens and the soft echo of our footsteps. I felt the jar of stones in my coat pocket, its weight a steady reminder of promises made. Ahead, streetlights cast long shadows, turning the pavement into a shifting mosaic, much like our own story, reshaped by each confession and correction. The next morning arrived in muted grays. I woke to messages pinging on my phone, links to the published feature, reactions pouring in from friends, strangers, even former colleagues. My chest tightened as I scrolled. Comments praised my resilience and authenticity, but others fixated on the betrayal, the drama of trust broken, call-outs of Nina and Marcus by name, speculation about lawyers and ruined careers. The river we thought we'd charted with care had become turbulent waters, swirling beyond our control. I dressed quickly and went to the workspace early, heart hammering against the hollow of my ribs. The open floor was empty, save for scattered chairs and the soft hum of the coffee machine. Nina was already there, cradling her mug like a lifeline. When she saw me, her eyes reddened anew, not from apology this time, but from shame and worry. "Claire," she began, voice trembling. "My parents saw the story. They think I betrayed you completely. Now they're cutting off support for my parents' business." She swallowed, gaze fixed on the table. My stomach dropped. I remembered her fear of disappointing them so vividly, how that had driven her secrecy before. Now, the public telling of our truth had dominoed into collateral damage. Marcus entered next, his usual calm replaced by a fragile edge. He paced between desks, phone pressed to his ear. I watched his shoulders slump as he hung up. When he looked up, his face was drawn. "A potential investor rescinded their offer," he said quietly. "They called the dispute too messy." The word echoed in the air, messy. Our hard-won clarity had turned into a stain. My throat tightened. I sank into an empty chair, pressing a hand to my mouth. The tension in my limbs felt like lead. Honesty had been our shield, but it had become a weapon aimed at the people I still cared about. I reached into my pocket and touched the smooth stone marked "Trust," its surface cool beneath my fingers. I stood and crossed to Nina, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I didn't mean for this," I whispered. "I thought openness would protect us all." Her shoulders jolted, and tears spilled unguarded. "I know," she sobbed. "But some secrets, once out, you can't corral back. I lost more than you did." Her words landed with the weight of regret. Marcus joined us, sliding a hand into mine. "We'll figure it out," he said, voice quieter than I'd ever heard. But I felt the tremor in his grasp, the unspoken fear that our river might have found dangerous rapids. That afternoon, I called Rami. His office line answered on the second ring. When he picked up, I heard the faint hum of courthouse doors. "Claire, how are things?" he asked. I swallowed, voice shaking. "We need to review the non-disclosure clauses," I said. "Is it possible to mitigate this fallout?" He hesitated, then outlined options: retractions, legal edits, requests for comment. Each came with its own risk of deeper drama. I ended the call and sat at my desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I thought of every draft clause we'd debated, from the harsh copyright notice to the collaborative phrasing. Now I faced another choice: whether to try to contain the narrative or let it shift us further downstream. My heart pounded as I realized that my revelation had saved my career, but at the cost of Nina's family business and Marcus's budding partnerships. Hours later, Nina and I met in the conference nook. I held printed statements drafted by Rami, carefully worded apologies, clarifications of mutual consent, requests to correct public records. Nina read them, tears glinting. "They'll publish this as another drama piece," she whispered. I nodded, chest tight. "We have to try," I said. "Maybe we can stem the current before it sweeps us all away." We sent the statements to key outlets, then waited. Silence stretched, thick as fog. My gaze kept drifting to the jar of stones: trust, honesty, second chance, each now bruised by our unintended consequences. Evening fell, and the workspace emptied. I sat alone, the empty chairs our silent audience, and let the weight of regret settle over me like dusk. Despite the sting, I knew I couldn't unspill the truths that had been trapped too long. Yet I would bear this bitter aftertaste as penance for the harm I'd unleashed. The river of our lives had widened beyond our banks, but maybe, with careful navigation, we could still guide its current toward calmer waters. I pressed the send button on one last email, a personal apology to Nina's parents and to the investor who withdrew, each word chosen with trembling care. Then I let my head fall forward onto my crossed arms, listening to the hush of servers and the soft pulse of hope that still met shadows of guilt. Night had settled into the empty workspace by the time my eyes flickered open. The glow of my laptop screen cut through the darkness, illuminating the apology emails I just sent, one to Nina's parents, another to the investor whose offer had been rescinded. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, heart still hammering. Outside, the hum of street traffic was a distant lullaby, but inside me, the river's current felt raw and unsteady. I closed the lid and leaned back in my chair, inhaling the faint scent of printer ink and stale coffee. Each apology felt like carving words into a ledger of regret. Guilt pressed against my ribs, remorse weighed down my limbs. I touched the jar of stones on my desk, the smooth surfaces cool beneath my fingertips. Trust, honesty, second chance, 3 promises now bruised by unintended harm. A soft ping broke the silence. An email had arrived from Nina's mother. With trembling hands, I opened it. The message was brief: "Thank you for your apology. I appreciate your honesty. We will reconsider our position." Relief washed through me, mingled with a sting of guilt for having caused them worry in the first place. My chest loosened just a breath's width. Moments later, another ping, this time from the investor's office. I stared at the subject line: clarification and next steps. I clicked. The email acknowledged my statement, expressing respect for the integrity behind it. They proposed discussing a revised term sheet that reflected my leadership role more clearly. My pulse fluttered, hope and trepidation warred in my veins. I typed a quick acknowledgement and set a meeting for early next week. The current shifted again when Marcus's name popped into my inbox. His email was long, filled with self-reproach and renewed commitment. "I'm sorry for all that followed the feature release. I underestimated the ripple effect. I want to make this right, personally and professionally." He closed with a simple, "Can we meet?" I exhaled a shaky laugh. I knew I still carried wariness, but beneath it, a flicker of understanding. We were both flawed vessels trying to stay afloat. I shut the laptop and stood, muscles stiff from hours of tension. The hush of the workspace felt like a second skin, comforting yet haunted. I gathered my coat and phone, and headed out into the cool night. The glass doors slid open without a sound, and I stepped onto the deserted sidewalk, city lights casting halos on wet asphalt. My breath rose in faint clouds. At a small park bench under a lamppost, Marcus was waiting, hands stuffed into his jacket pockets. His face was pale in the lamplight. He looked as worn as I felt. I sank beside him, the bench creaking under our weight. He exhaled, fogging the air. "I've spent the evening drafting ideas to repair things at home," he said. "And I contacted that other investor who pulled out, apologized directly. They haven't replied yet." His shoulders slumped. I hope you can forgive me." I turned to him, feeling the river of my compassion rising against caution. "I already have," I said quietly. My voice trembled like a candle flame. "But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. We have to rebuild every day." He nodded, relief and remorse warring in his eyes. I reached out, brushing his sleeve. The warmth of his presence stilled the ache in my chest. The park was empty, save for distant sirens and the whisper of leaves in the night breeze. I closed my eyes and let the hush wrap around me. The apology emails, the investor's tentative return, Nina's mother's kindness, Marcus's contrition, all were tributaries feeding this widening current. I realized that truth, once unleashed, was impossible to recapture, but too much secrecy would dam our progress. I stood and held out my hand. He took it, and we walked in silence down the path, shoulders nearly touching. Ahead, a small fountain gurgled under starlight, water tracing curved paths around its basin. I paused, watching the flow, how it adjusted to obstacles, carving new lines in stone. "We'll find our way," I said, voice soft as the night air. Bit by bit. Marcus squeezed my hand and offered a faint smile. "Together. Together." The word echoed in the night. I let it settle in my mind, a promise forging new banks for our river. And as we turned back toward the distant glow of the workspace windows, I felt a quiet determination. This current, however bruised, would carry us into whatever dawn lay ahead. We sat across from each other at the cafe table, steam curling from our mugs in lazy spirals. Morning light filtered through the rain-speckled window, painting everything in muted gold. I held the jar of stones in my lap, trust, honesty, second chance, each word a pulse against my leg. Marcus stirred his coffee, watching the swirl settle. He cleared his throat. "They approved the revised term sheet," he said quietly, voice rough. Relief bloomed in my chest, but beneath it a knot of guilt tightened. He slid a small envelope across the table. Inside, a check for half of the first month's revenue share, payable to my name alone. My fingers closed around it, the paper crisped beneath my skin. I nodded, swallowing past the lump in my throat. "Thank you," I whispered, though the words felt strained. The money symbolized validation and renewal, but also reminded me of everything we'd sacrificed. Outside, rain pattered against the pavement. I watched droplets race each other down the window, feeling the echo of our journey in their uneven paths. Some raced ahead, brash and impatient, others lingered, hesitant. I pressed my palm against the glass, tracing the curve of a droplet as it slowed. My heart thrummed, a mix of triumph and exhaustion. Over the next hours, we finalized the last paperwork, signatures on the updated partnership agreement, notarized statements from Nina's parents reinstating their support, a note from the advisor reaffirming his offer. Each document felt like a stitch in the gaping wound we'd created together. When the final pen stroke landed on the paper, I closed my eyes, tasting something bittersweet on my tongue, victory laced with regret. We walked back to the workspace, the check tucked into my notebook and the jar of stones weighing heavy in my pocket. The corridor lights hummed overhead, and the open door of our studio beckoned like an old friend. Inside, prototypes glowed softly, wires coiled like silent serpents, and the scent of fresh coffee drifted from the corner. It was familiar but newly fragile, as if it could shatter under the wrong breath. Nina stepped forward, holding her phone. She showed me a message thread from our early beta users, glowing testimonials, requests for new features, offers to join as testers or consultants. "They believe in us," she said, voice catching. I felt a swell of warmth, proof that our product, born of betrayal and rebirth, resonated beyond our scars. Her gaze flicked to the jar of stones on my desk. "Are those still with you?" she asked. I reached into my pocket and set the jar beside the keyboard. The stones rattled softly. "They're my reminder," I said. "Of how far we've come, and what it cost." My fingers brushed "second chance," its painted letters chipped at the edges. The imperfections made it more real. Marcus joined us, carrying 2 mugs. He handed one to me, then leaned against the table. "I don't expect everything to be perfect," he admitted. "But I promise to keep earning your trust." His eyes were steady, but vulnerability trembled beneath. I sipped the coffee, its warmth unfurling through my chest. Each swallow tasted of hope and caution. I set the mug down and looked at them both, the 2 people who'd nearly drowned me in their ambition but then gave me space to reclaim my own current. "I'll keep guiding this ship," I said softly. "But I need open channels, no more hidden turns." My voice wavered, honest and raw. Nina nodded, Marcus exhaled, and in that hush, we shared the fragile promise of renewal. We spent the rest of the day mapping features for the next release, voice notes for creatives, collaboration hubs, offline modes. We sketched flows on whiteboards, our laughter punctuating the plan like gentle ripples across water. It felt like the defiant pulse of new life, unstoppable yet careful. As dusk settled, I lingered by the window again, watching the city lights blink on one by one. The river of my life had cut deep channels through betrayal, reconciliation, and growth. Now it flowed wider, carrying us all toward unknown currents. I touched the jar of stones once more, fingers tracing each word. Trust. Honesty. Second chance. In that moment, I felt the bitter aftertaste I'd promised myself I'd always remember, the cost of revelation, the harm I'd caused, the weight of truth unleashed. But I also tasted possibility, renewed purpose. The jar rattled in my hand, a steady heartbeat against the hush of the studio. And as I turned back to my team, ready to chart the next bend, I knew this river, scarred but alive, would carry us further than we'd ever dared to dream.